Hi everybody and welcome back to a new episode of Diagnose Dan. Today we're working on a 2007 Mercedes GL500 and the customer needs to use these every morning. Overnight the battery dies and every morning he needs to jump start the car, and obviously he wants this fixed. So let's see if we can diagnose this one together. Now every time I get a parasitic drain to the shop, I always follow the exact same procedure, and for me, that always works. Now the first thing I always do is talk to the customer. Is the car being driven on a daily basis, or is it being parked for longer periods of time? Because when a car is not being used, it will use a tiny bit of energy that over time will drain the battery. This is normal. Now this car is being driven on a daily basis. The next thing I always do is fully charge the battery, because most of the time these vehicles come into the shop with a weak battery. The next thing I do is check the charging system and check the battery itself. Is the battery any good? Is it the right technology battery, AMG, flooded, etc.? And is it the right size battery? A bigger battery can store more energy. Now, I did this test yesterday because the car came in yesterday and the charging system and the battery is fine. I charged the battery again this morning in preparation for this video because we cannot charge the battery and find a parasitic drain at the same time. So in the next step, we need to confirm the customer complaint. Do we actually have a parasitic drain? If we want to confirm a parasitic drain, or if we want to find it, the car must be fully asleep. And this means that all unnecessary electric loads must be shut off. But every time we open a door, the dome light comes on, all the modules start talking to each other, the instrument cluster comes on. In other words, the network wakes up. Now this is something we don't want, so we're going to prepare the vehicle. We're going to open the doors, open the hood, open the trunk. We're going to latch and lock the doors so we can enter the vehicle, do our testing without waking it up. Now everything is opened, everything is latched and locked. Now the first thing I noticed about this vehicle is the right front suspension. Now look at that, there's almost no room between the right front tire and the fender. Now let's compare it to the rear and we can see a huge difference. Now let's compare it to the left front and you will also see that there is a lot more room between the tire and the fender at the left front. So I'm almost certain there is a problem or a leak in the right front air suspension. Now the question is, could this be causing our parasitic drain? Now another thing I noticed is this aftermarket entertainment system. This is definitely not original, and the customer himself also suspected this unit, so he said he disconnected it, but the problem did not go away. Now hopefully we will find out if he was right about that by the end of this video. The battery is located underneath the passenger seat, and you have to put the seat all the way forward and upward, and then you have to remove some panels and some ducting, and then you can get access to the battery to test it and charge it. Now while I was removing some of the panels, I actually found something that I find very, very cool and which I have never seen before. It almost looks like one of those Japanese comics, but on the cover it says pit menu. Now it appears to be some kind of menu to get your car serviced. For instance, over here it says 10W30 and then you see prices. So I guess that's the starter, and then we're having spark plugs for the main dish, and then we're having dessert. Well, obviously I can't read Japanese, but I've never seen anything like it before, and I think it's really, really cool. Now on the cover it says February 2007. Now the car is also from 2007, so it makes you wonder if at some point this car was driving around in Japan. I opened the glove box and inside is still some of the original paperwork. Now look at that. I guess that is suspicion confirmed. Now why am I showing you this? I absolutely have no idea. Is this going to help us diagnose the vehicle? Absolutely not. So I guess we need to get back at confirming the parasitic drain. Now, since we were fooling around a little bit, some time has passed, and in the meanwhile, the car has totally fallen asleep. Now, if we were to disconnect and connect the battery terminal right now, the car would wake up again. So this is something we don't want to do. So to measure the current draw, right now, we have to use an amp clamp. Now, if you're using an amp clamp to find a parasitic drain, make sure you use a high accuracy amp clamp that's capable of reading milliamps. Now, I always use this one made by Medtronic. Now, this one I know for a fact that is very, very accurate because I've had it for many years and I've tested it on many, many occasions. Now let's zero it and let's put it around the negative battery terminal over here. And doesn't matter if we use the negative battery terminal or the positive, absolutely not, but the negative is very conveniently placed right here. Now let's take a look at the reading, and it's actually reading 800 milliamps. So that's 0.8 of an amp. Now I guess that's customer complaint confirmed. If you're trying to confirm a battery drain, but you're not sure if the car is asleep, all you need to do is wait a little bit longer. Some cars go asleep after a minute, others after 15 minutes, and others take over an hour. Now, if the current draw hasn't come down after 2 hours, you can be certain that either the car is not going to sleep because a module is keeping it awake, or the car is asleep, but you got a parasitic drain. Now, like I said before, it's normal for cars to use a tiny bit of energy when they're not being used that eventually will drain the battery. Now, what is a normal number? That's somewhere between 50 and 70, 80 milliamps as a rule of thumb. Now, on a bigger car like this, with lots of modules and a big battery, I would even be comfortable with something close to 100 milliamps. But 800 milliamps, that's way too much. Now, the first thing you always need to do, and that can save you a lot of time, and that is, if you got one available, is take a look with a thermal imager. When current runs through a component, that component heats up. Now, that heat signature can easily be detected with a thermal imager. Now, sometimes you get really lucky, but the success rate really depends on the height of the current and the accessibility or the visibility of the component, so you can take a look at it with a thermal imager. Now, what I quickly did is I removed a cover from a fuse box over here, an engine cover over there, and some other covers like a cover from a fuse box in the rear of the vehicle, so we have a direct line of sight on the components. Now let me show you the thermal imager is working. You can see my hand showing up. Now let's take a look at that fuse box. And I don't see anything out of the ordinary. That's glare, by the way. Let's take a look at the engine. Now let's go to the rear of the vehicle. There's another big fuse box in the rear of the vehicle. Let's take a look at that. Over there. And as you can see, nothing shows up. Now let me quickly off camera take a detailed look of the vehicle with the thermal imager, and I will show you if anything comes up. I took a detailed look with the thermal imager at this car, and I took an extra look at suspicious components like this aftermarket screen. But unfortunately, nothing shows up. Now let me show you how accurate this thermal imager actually is. Let me real quick touch this seat over here, and let's take a look with the thermal imager. And you can still see, come on, focus, the imprint of my hand. So unfortunately, no joy, so I guess we gotta solve this one the old-fashioned way. Unfortunately, nothing showed up on the thermal imager, but hey, you can't always be lucky. This does mean we gotta do it the old-fashioned way, and that's rather labor-intensive. Now this means we gotta check the current flow through each fuse one by one, and on this car, that's a nightmare because there are fuses everywhere, under the hood, under the dash, under the seats, in the rear of the vehicle. It's a nightmare. Now we don't want to start pulling fuses because that might wake up the network again. How can we determine the current flow through a fuse without pulling it? If current flows through a fuse, that fuse becomes a little consumer. It's a little resistor. and it takes a little bit of energy, and that results in the voltage on one side being a little bit lower than on the other side. There is a voltage drop. Now, this can be measured in millivolts by using a multimeter. Now, if we check this fuse right over here, we can see there is no voltage drop. And no voltage drop means no current flow. Now, this is a very accurate method, but it does mean we've got to check each and every individual fuse. And on this car, there are a lot. Now, it looks like on this car, there are fuses everywhere. There are fuses over here. I saw a fuse box in the side of the dash. There are fuses next to the battery over there. There are fuses in the rear of the vehicle, many of them over there, and I gotta check each and every one of them. Now, that's just the fuses I quickly found, but I guess there are a lot more. Now, next step, I need to go through each and every fuse and measure the voltage drop. Now, I'm not gonna bother you with that, so I'm gonna I'm gonna do that off camera, and hopefully when I get back to you, I have got some news. Now, I started out at the front of the vehicle, and this is actually the second fuse box I was going to test. Now, let me show you what happens when we measure this fuse over here. And it's kind of hard because it's almost like eating with chopsticks. You need to do this one-handed. Now, come on. We've got actually a reading of 0.0 millivolts. Now, this is the same as all the fuses in the front. But when I came to the last fuse at the bottom, and let's see if I can do that, we actually have got a quite significant voltage drop of 5.5 millivolts-ish. Now let's quickly jump into service data to see what that fuse is actually powering up. Now, I already found the fuse box, and it's actually fuse number 10. And fuse number 10 is the booster blower electronic blower controller N29/2. Now, when I search on N29/2, I'm getting this picture, and here it says, the booster blower is used to improve the aeration of the rear passenger compartment. And it shows me a picture of a blower motor with its own controller that's in the center console for the rear passengers. I did some more research, and it looked like that inside the center console, there's actually a blower motor for the rear passengers. Now, that blower motor has got its own speed controller, or end states, or whatever you want to call it, N29/2. Now, obviously, to do some measurements and to get access, I need to take a few things apart. Now, I was working inside the vehicle, and I removed the cup holders, and over there we actually have got the blower motor with the module. So I decided to grab the thermal imager again with the cup holders removed, and look at that. That module glows in the dark. Now, I was removing those cup holders to get access to that module when it was really quiet, and I thought I heard something. Now, you need to be really quiet, but let me take my mic and shove it into that vent. Now, let me know if you guys can hear what I'm hearing. That little blower motor control module was actually being held down with only one screw. I removed it, and I could lift up that module, and now we can look underneath it. And when we look underneath that module, let me turn on the light, we can actually see that the blower motor is running. The car is totally off, but the blower motor is still running. Now, with that little module disconnected, that fan immediately stops spinning. Now, let me show you guys what happens when I reconnect it again. So let's reconnect it, and you can see that immediately that fan starts running again. Now, when I take a closer look at this module, I even see some signs of heat damage. So at this point, I'm pretty convinced that this module is our culprit. Now, it wouldn't be the first time that a blower motor controller is causing a parasitic drain. I've seen it many times before on many different brands. So let's go ahead and order a new one, and let's see if it fixes our problem. I went ahead and ordered a new module, and it just came in. Now let's plug in the new module to that connector, and hopefully when we plug it in, that fan doesn't start spinning again. This is a brand new module, so let's plug it into that connector. And let's see what happens. Now, I just plugged it in, and it looks like we made the right call because that fan is not spinning. Well, I guess this is the moment of truth. I installed the new module and I had a break, a cup of coffee, so the car had a chance to go back to sleep. Now let's take our amp clamp, let's zero it, and let's put it around that terminal. Now, are you guys ready? There we go. As you can see, a perfect 20 milliamps. That's even better than I expected. Well, 30, 20, 30. Final check. We still need to check whether we can control the speed of that rear blower motor with that new module installed. I turned on the ignition, so let's crank it up. And let's dial it down again. Now it looks like that works perfectly. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we did a pretty decent job. Isn't that fascinating? This tiny module was turning that huge car into a no-crank every day. Now, I guess I'm gonna order Japanese night and have spark plugs for dinner. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm still gonna advise the customer to get his suspension checked. Now, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel and ring that little bell. You get a notification each time I upload a video. And remember, Diagnose Dan, fix it again. See you next time, guys. Now, how can we determine the current? Now, with that little module disconnected, that fan immediately stops spinning. Now, let me show you guys what happens when I plug it back in. So, let's plug it back in. Come on. And you can see that immediately that fan starts spinning. Damn it.